And we're live today with Jeff Tucker, my first roommate in tech school. First guy I knew out of basic training or met out of basic training, Jeffrey Tucker.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, sir. It has been nothing but fun ever since then. Uh, been stationed together a couple of times. Kept in contact for most of our respective careers. Jeff just reminded me that we've known each other for 29 years, which is a long damn time. So, Jeff, what are you doing now? Where are you at? What are you doing?
I moved back to Tennessee after retirement in 2017 and took about a year off. Didn't really do anything for a year, which was phenomenal. I'm living in a small town in East Tennessee, kind of south of Knoxville, about west of Gatlinburg. Got into real estate and been doing real estate ever since. Love it. It's gives me a lot of flexibility, a lot of freedom. I think I take that from when I was a recruiter, where I really enjoyed. You know, you're really just you're helping people. Like I really like helping first time home buyers. That's because I remember being a first time home buyer and my real estate agent, and I know I probably drove her crazy looking at 40 homes, and she's probably like, "Is this guy ever going to buy one?" And then you buy it, and it's $100,000, and I think now I'm like, that poor lady only made like $3,000 off my house,
Yes, yes.
and I'm like. You can't find anything now for $100,000. So
Nothing that you'd want to live in. Maybe a tent.
yeah, or maybe a quarter of an acre or something like that. But so yeah, so I've been doing that. I'm married. I got two bonus daughters, and my son is now 28. The middle bonus daughter is getting married next weekend. So we have been in wedding mode now for about 2 months, getting geared up for that.
That's busy. That's busy.
That is busy, yeah. But she's marrying a great guy, so they're young, but you know, I can't imagine that 23 being like, "Oh, I'm going to get married." I'm like, no, no, I'm not either. And the woman would have been smart to be like, "No, we're not."
Yeah, I did that, and it didn't go the way
It
I
doesn't.
thought.
No, it never. You think you're smart, but you're really not.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
But she
So,
is. They're both very level headed. They're nothing like we were at that age.
well, thank God.
No, yeah,
Thank
nothing.
God. I dabbled in real estate as well, and what I noticed is that there's a lot of time during the day. How do you fill the time during the day? Because that's what drove me the most nuts is not having enough stuff to do.
It's a good question. I do a lot of stuff around the house. My wife works for a company here in town, basically largest employer that we have in the town I live in, and she's very busy in that job, and so I try to keep stuff done around here, just to make sure that when she gets off work that she doesn't have to do anything, or we have to, um, but she's always it's kind of funny. She'll, it's 90 degrees here right now, like it is, I'm sure, where you live at,
Yep.
and I feel so guilty if I'm not busy, and then I'll be like, I'm gonna go lay in the pool, and I'm like, no, I'd feel so bad if she walked out and I'm laying in the pool. But you know what she'll say? She'll like, no, you should get in the pool, and I'm like, my conscience does not allow me to do it. I mean, there's days where I'm like working outside, and I get out and I jump in the pool, cool off, and get out and go about my business. But no, I just do stuff around the house. I do some marketing research. I'll do, um, kind of check homes in the area. Kind of see what's
Mm-hmm.
some changes in the market, because the market's kind of shifted a lot from when I started doing it to now. Um, so it's just different. It's just different. Which I'm sure when you started doing it, and it was probably like when I was, and then now it's a completely different ballgame.
Yeah, yeah. Laws have changed. Things like that has changed as well.
Yeah, the laws changing was a big deal.
To your point, I had a person that I showed at least 45 houses to. They never bought one, and now that I could charge for that, it might have been a different game.
Yeah, my record was 56. They bought a house, but it was 56 houses.
I had to let him go. You need somebody else that wants this more than I do.
Well, and the funny thing is, and this is terrible to say, when we started out looking, I remember the limit was 800,000. So you start, you're like, okay, so you keep looking, keep looking, keep looking, keep looking, because you're just like, well, it's going to pay well. The house that we ended up buying was $320,000, and
Don't do
that
the hourly rate on that.
then, yeah, then you go back and you think, okay, I mean, but I mean, hey, it's part of the business,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
because there for a while you're selling, or you're helping people buy homes, and oh well, they bought the first one they looked at, That's great. Same thing with selling them. First buyer walks through the door and they're like, I want this house. And the house has been on the market 12 hours and it's sold. And they're like, well, that was easy. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, sometimes it is, but sometimes it sits there. It sits there for a while.
For a
Uh,
long while.
unfortunately. Yeah, unfortunately.
So, so take me back to the about 30 years ago when Jeff Tucker decided to join the United States Air Force.
Oh, buddy. Well, that was so if you go back a little over 30 years, let's go back 31 years. So I basically was working in restaurants and it was like probably in like December, January timeframe of like 95. So we're going way back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I was a high school graduate when the Gulf War was going on, which I'm sure, with your dad being Army, you remember all that.
Mm-hmm.
So, my mom and dad were like, recruiters were calling constantly when you're graduating high school and they're blown, my mom and dad were like, no, you're not doing this. There's a war. And I'm like, whatever. I had no interest in it. So anyway, fast forward, and my dad finally one day, he goes, you've got to do something, and I was never a bad kid. I was never a bad person. I was 23 when I went in. I was 22 when my dad and I had this conversation. And he goes, you got to do something. He said, you're about to hit the age where I got to take you off my insurance. He said, you're not going to have, that age. I'm like, I don't need insurance. I'm good. I'm not going to get hurt, you know. So he said, have you ever thought about going to the Guard? We have a Guard unit here. Now, mind you, no one in my family besides my uncle who did two-year stint in the Army had ever been in the military. I knew nothing about anything. I mean, I had no idea. So I go out to the Guard base and talk to the lady who's the recruiter. And I said, well, how does this work? How many hours a week? She's like, oh, you're only working 1 weekend a month. I'm like, no. I need a full-time job with benefits. I said, that's why I'm doing this. And she goes, well, it takes a while. And I'm like, okay. Well, I left there and kind of in our little downtown area. Back then, it wasn't like it is now, but our little downtown area here, it was the Army, the Marines, the Navy, and the Air Force. They all, recruiting stations are all lined up right there. So I didn't really have a plan as to what branch I was going to walk into, but I had a buddy of mine was in the Army, he was a little older than me, that I was friends with his brother, and he had been in the Gulf War. And when he came out of the Army, he just wasn't the same. And it wasn't like he didn't have PTSD or anything like that. He was just different than I remember him going in, which looking back now, I'm like, well, shit, if I'd have got out after 40 years, I'd have been, people have been like, who the hell is this guy,
Yeah.
Anyway, so then I used to play like backyard football with this group of guys during the fall, and there was a guy, and he was in the Marines, and he talked about it all the time, how great the Marines were, and the Marines are great. I got plenty of Marine friends, and they're just super cool guys. And I was like, man, if it was so great, why'd you get out? He just kind of gave me this blank stare. Well, when I'm walking down through there, I'm like, well, I'm not going into the Army because my buddy. I'm not going to the Marines because that guy couldn't give me a legit answer. So it was the Navy. Walking in the Navy office, did my little practice ASVAB, did really well on it. And they were like, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, look, I just want to travel, see the world, for a while and see if I like it. If I don't like it, I'll get out. And all of a sudden the guy's like, look, you ever been arrested, do drugs, blah, 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 the whole, questions they ask you. And I was like, no, I'm good. And he goes, look, you could probably get it in our nuke program. And I'm like, oh, that sounds really cool. And he goes, yeah, man, we got these badass nuclear subs. I'm like, submarines? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, dude, I ain't afraid of the water. I said, but there's one thing I do know about the military. He goes, what? I said, there's no girls on submarines. I said, I ain't doing that shit. No. And he goes, well, there's not. I said, I don't know. I said, so we talked. They were cool. And looking back on it, I probably didn't give them a legit chance. So you're going to love this. So walking to the Air Force office, Rob, I played golf with him about 10 years ago. Anyway, he's sitting at his desk, feet are up on his desk, in a pair of flip-flops, a pair of shorts, and a golf shirt. He goes, hey, man, you got about 15 minutes. I got to be at the golf course. I got a tee time. And I said, I'll be back tomorrow. I said, but this seems like something I'd be interested in.
Sold you easy, huh?
I was sold right there. I was like, flip-flops, shorts, a golf shirt, and okay, I could do this. So go back the next day. We talked for a minute, and I told him I'd been to the Navy and all this, and told him what I did on my practice test. And he was like, well, all right, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. And I told him, and I said, well, yeah, man. I said, really, I said, I'd love to I didn't know anything about assignments, or he didn't talk to me about any of that crap. I mean, seriously, I should have punched him in the face when I saw him. Anyway, so he's talking to me about, what I want to do. And I was like, well, I just want to travel a lot. And I said, I'd love to like live near the ocean for a while. I've never done that. And he was like, cool. So he starts kind of going through his book, and he was like, well, these tech schools are in Biloxi. He's like, man, you did good on your electronics. What about this P-mail job? And I'm like, well, what do they do? Of course, he didn't know what they did. 99% of the people we talked to don't know what they did. And I was like, well, Biloxi. And he's like, yeah, it's down the Gulf Coast. And I'm thinking Panama City Beach. That's in my head. I'm not thinking Biloxi and the water was black and you couldn't get in it. And there's, hypodermic needles on the beach. That was never crossing my mind. So anyway, so I was like, all right, man, what's next? And he goes, well, you got to go to MEPS. I'm like, well, what's MEPS? And he said, well, this is where you go take your physical and all this. Of course, he gives me the typical recruiter. Hey, look, man, you get over there. You see all these boxes you check, and said you didn't do this. You cannot change your answer no matter what they say to you. And I was like, all right, being a recruiter later, I understood exactly what he was talking about. So go over there. Guy's talking to me, and he's like, well, you can do 4 or 6 years. And I was like, well, what's the difference? And he's like, well, 4 years are this, 6 years are that. And I already had college. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Let's do 6 years. That'll give me plenty of time because I knew tech school was a year long, basically. Mm-hmm. So I was like, well, that's a year I'm going to be stuck in Mississippi. And then after that, so signed up. Never once told my dad I did it. I'll never forget. This was April the 13th. I had just turned 23 on April the 8th. So come home, or I come back to their house. I'm BSing with them and blah, blah, blah. And then a couple days go by, and I was like, hey, Dad. And he goes, what? I said, well, I did it. And he goes, what? I said, well, I joined the Air Force. He's like, really? I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, what are you going to be doing? And I said, I don't know, some job, P-mail or something like that. I mean, they gave me a guaranteed job, which was, I heard yours and Chuck's conversation about they didn't really do that to a lot of people. So at this point, I think in his brain, I am in the Guard. I am not active duty. So, another week goes by. I'm talking to my mom, and I just thought this would kill my mother. I mean, my mom's mom had passed away a couple years before that, and it was really hard on our family. And, and I was just like, anytime something like that happens, and, I don't know if it's ever happened with you, like, your family dynamic kind of changes, because she was kind of like one of the people in our lives she was kind of, that you always hear people talk about, oh, you've got Big Mama. Well, she was a little bitty skinny lady, but she was kind of the glue that held us all together and kept us, the way we were. And so things had changed a little bit in my family, and nothing bad, but so I just thought it was going to kill her. But I think she, in her head, she was like, well, this will be good for him. Another month goes by. My recruiter's calling, and my dad's like, he's around here somewhere, and finally I'm at a bar in Knoxville playing pool. The bar's still there. I can't think of the name of it though, but it's right by UT campus. And there he is. He's in there with some friends. And he goes, I've been trying to get in touch with you. You got to come to these meetings. I said, man, I ain't coming to no meetings and I ain't going anywhere. I said, I'm leaving September the 12th or September the 11th. And I said, I promise you, I said, I'll be ready to go. And he was like, well, I'd like if you check in with me. I said, I'll try. That was a horrible, horrible DEP member. I mean, horrible. And if people don't know what DEP is, a delayed entry program. And when it happened to me when I was a recruiter, I would cuss these kids. I was so mad. I was like, where are you at? Anyway, so that's kind of how I ended up. I went to basic training. I don't know. I mean, me, my personality. I always try to make light of almost every situation I can because I think it makes it easier. I mean, literally, my basic training picture, I was smiling. I mean, I'm literally smiling. And, nobody smiles in those photos. No. You're serious. You're a hard ass. You're a tough guy. I'm over there with this big freaking cheesy grin on my face. And so that's kind of the way I looked at it. They made me the dorm chief because, day 5 or 6, we went through a guy. I'll never forget these guys. John Latimer from California and a guy named Michael Fidd from Miami. How I remember those guys, I do not know. But I remember Fidd was a gigantic Cuban guy. Huge, and he was terrifying to be around, but he was the nicest guy. But 2 days in, he was crying, crying constantly. And I mean, he would probably be, yeah, I was crying. Well, then they gave Latimer the job, and his whole mentality was, I'm just going to scream at you till you do what you need to be doing. Well, that doesn't work, especially with people, everybody's in there, their testosterone's high, they're wanting to be the alpha male and, and all this stuff. And one day we were at PT, and I don't know, Latimer was somewhere, I don't know where he was at. And these guys wouldn't get in formation. I just was like, get in effing formation. And that my little TI comes over. He goes, you're my new dorm chief. Throw Latimer's shit in the floor. You're going to be the first bed. And his name was Barney. He was about, of course, I'm only like 5'8", 5'9". He was probably 5'5" max. And he was a little bitty bulldog looking guy. And I'm like, it was hard for me to take him serious. He'd get mad and I just like, yeah, all right. So that was it, man. And, we basically had this meeting and, I said, we can either do two things. We can sit here and try to be like an honor flight, or we can just pray we could all get through this and get out of here and go wherever we're going to go our separate ways. And everybody came to the same agreement. We're going to get the hell out of here and we're going to go our separate ways. And, it was, I look back on it and you laugh, you think about all the crap that went on during basic training. You're just like, seriously,
Yeah.
just the stupid things that happen but you take some of those things that you learned and you probably still use them today, just like I do.
My
Folding my
underwear is still
clothes.
folded.
Yeah, folding my clothes. I know Robin, she's always just like, I know when we first started dating and then she was like, why do you fold your shirts like that? I'm like, you'll see. You make the most of a limited space. I said, I can get 85 t-shirts in a small drawer. I said, not a problem at all. So that's how I ended up in. That was really it. And then I got the Keysler and I was ready to kill my recruiter. And I found out I was in Mississippi.
That's not Panama City.
That is not. That is not. And, your job, our job wasn't one of those where we're traveling a lot. And I'm like,
No.
you could have made me a load master. I'm like, you could have put me in something. I'm like, Lord, I'm like, here you steer me to doing this. And once I met load masters, they were like, oh yeah, our plane always breaks down in Hawaii. I'm like, go to hell. I'm like, really? So that's how I ended up in. It was, wasn't really anything shocking. But when I finally told my dad, though, oh, he was pissed. And I tell you, when I told him at basic training graduation that I did 6 years.
No, you didn't.
Mm-hmm. He was mad. He wasn't mad. I mean, I think it bothered him that I went in more than it bothered my mom, because nobody knows I'm an only child. But my dad was just like, you've changed. We can get you out of here. I can call. I know, I got connections with some congressmen. I can do this. I can do that. And I'm like, Dad, I'm good. But I went from, like, I heard your one buddy in his interview with you. I mean, I went from like 145 pounds to 175 when I went in. So, I mean, I put on like 30 pounds of muscle and I did look different. Physically, I looked different. And my mom said she didn't recognize me at first. Of course, my hair was a lot shorter, all that stuff. But it was, my dad was just like, we can get you. We know you can leave. I promise you, we'll find you a way. I said, Dad, I'm good. I am good. I never, I don't know, it never freaked me out. Never bothered me. I was like, but I think that kind of stems from, I truly believe this. And I think, of course, you grew up, on Army bases. I played sports growing up. I can remember my TI yelling at me and people were like, it doesn't faze you. I said, did you ever meet my high school basketball coach?
Right.
And he will listen to this. I mean, he will literally find this on Facebook and listen. He'll laugh about that. And I think I've told him, I'm like, he yells at me 10 times worse than this guy's ever yelled at me. And I think that's the stuff that prepares you, the teamwork, the discipline, these things you've got, I don't care what sports you play or, really what you do in general, you've got to work with who your coworkers are, or, your teammates are, or whatever you are. And I think that really, that translated over for me into the military. It was into the Air Force. It was like, oh, I can do this. Okay, well, we need a laundry crew. We need guys who are going to do this. We need guys who are going to do this. We need guys to do this. Oh, you're really good at folding shirts. All right, you're going to fold shirts and you're going to do socks and you're going to do this. And it's like, once you figure that out, man, it was just a breeze. But it's just getting to that point.
Yeah.
It's just getting to that point.
So 6 years took you to, I think, after did you go to Osan right out of basic?
I went to Holloman. Holloman was my first assignment.
Holloman, then Osan for a little while, and then you came to Langley. So 6 years took you almost through. You probably had to reenlist leaving Osan.
I reenlisted after 9/11 because I'd taken a deployment right after 9/11. I don't know if you were still there or not. And went to Saudi, and then when I was over there, I was eligible. I was eligible for I could either extend or I could reenlist. And at the time, I heard you in another one of these talking about bonuses. The bonus was $30,000 to reenlist. So I got $15,000 tax free up front, and the next $15,000 over the next 5 years or whatever. I think I did a 6-year reenlistment, maybe five. And so I got that, tax free. So that was a no brainer.
Yep. So that was. Did you reenlist because you wanted to stay in, or was it for the money?
For the money. I really, man, at that point there, I was really, I honestly, Jake, and I've said this so many times. I think I was just different when it came to a lot of this stuff. I was just, you love what you. I should say, I never loved that job, but I loved what the job stood for.
Hmm.
I loved what the commitment stood for. I love especially after 9/11. I mean, you're just, if you couldn't be patriotic after 9/11, you might as well just leave the country. I mean, it was just like really, um, so I think I just got really comfortable. I was happy with where I was at. I mean, we had a really good group of guys at Langley. I mean,
Hmm.
we were all close in age and majority of us were single. And it was like, it was, I joked about this the other day. I was talking with a Marine friend of mine and I said, I don't think I could be in the military today the way I was at that age because I would probably gotten kicked out within a year. The shit that we did,
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, the stuff that, and it wasn't bad. It was just in today's society, you know, it would have been awful.
it
It
would
would
be
be
frowned upon.
awful.
If anybody recorded
Slightly.
it, I'm so glad there was no cameras, camera phones.
Oh, dude. Especially going like to Korea. I mean, yeah, Korea was just it's a shit
Hmm.
show, but even New Mexico, Virginia, you know, yeah, it was, it was definitely different.
For sure,
But
for sure.
met great people, man. I mean, I did, you and I reconnected at Langley.
Hmm.
Keith was at Langley. Charles was at Langley.
Hmm.
Uh, Even the Drizga, he was there.
Yep.
Spurlock, Wayne Tate, all those guys. I mean, it was all Melvin, Tony.
Yep.
They were all good guys. All good people to be around. So, and the Wood,
Oh yeah, for sure. The wood.
yeah,
Yeah, it was a good. It was a really good group at that place at that time, for sure.
yeah. And it's hard to, you probably had this sometimes throughout your career was, people are like, oh, would you go back to Korea? I'm like, no, I don't want to go back to Korea. I said, it's not going to Korea. I said, the people I was there with, it was a perfect setup with the guys that I ran around with.
Hmm.
I'd be afraid if I went back now. And the rules changed. Back when we were at Langley, we would go to Charlie's house and have parties, and it was just everybody. It was senior master sergeants, airmen,
Yep.
two stripers, whatever. And it's like you can't do that anymore.
No.
And that was a shock when I got out of recruiting and went back to that. I was just like, I remember like first or second week there, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna have a party, and they're like, oh, cool. And I started inviting everybody. Like, no, 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 no. You can't invite everybody. I'm like, well, why not? They're like, you just don't do that. You're not allowed to. You can't fraternize with. I'm like, this is a problem. And I'm not. I wasn't talking about a personal problem. This is a problem for the Air Force in general.
Hmm.
This because I found that, yeah, you can have. Not everyone can though. You can separate your personal life from your work life, and but you build that work camaraderie with those people on an outside the work basis because at work it's work, it's business. It's just business, and then
Hmm.
when we get off work, it's not business. You know, I drank more beer with a senior master sergeant than we probably drank with anybody in our damn lives.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. For
And
sure.
here we were, like senior airmen and young staff sergeants, and it was like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
well,
Yeah. But everybody got the invite.
everyone got the invite.
Every time.
I'll tell you, I talk about her a lot. People through just I don't really talk about the Air Force that much, but I do talk about her a lot because the one thing I always liked about her was she was just a no nonsense person.
Zero.
There was no, if and I'll do you remember that day? I can't remember the guys that came in, but three new guys came in. They were all like staffs or techs. Meeting was over with. They were just sitting there bullshitting, and she just lost her shit on them, like first day. And I remember like you and I were kind of like these staffs, and we kind of walked by. I said, "Hey man," I said, "when the meeting's over with, you need to get the hell out." I said,
Yep.
"She ain't playing around with you." I said, "She will literally get you out of here." And those guys were like, "What?" And I'm like, "She is not going to play." I said, "You do not want to be on her bad side.
Nope.
You do not. No,
And it didn't take much to get on that side.
no." I mean, you and I were very lucky. And when she retired, you and I both were like, "We got to get the f out of
As fast as possible.
here." I knew.
I see what's coming and I don't like it.
Oh yeah, I remember she hadn't been gone 2 days, and they're like, "You two are going on swings." We're like, "Man, this is bull." It's like right in the middle of summer, softball season. It's like, "Oh,
Yep.
this is bullshit." They're like, "Nope, you guys are going on swings. The gravy train is over for you two." And I'm like, "Oh God."
Yeah,
So I was
it
like,
worked out. It
"Oh,
worked out.
it did work out." I hate that she retired though. She was a good one.
She was. Yep. 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 That's a tough decision. Um, I remember we are talking to her about her retirement, and it was, keep her daughter in one place, don't want to uproot the family again. What was it for you? What was the decision to retire?
I was just tired of it. like I told you before we got on, I had a really bad experience at about year 16. It was my own doing. It was my own doing. I took full responsibility for what happened. And, I got like, I really, like, I remember when I got in trouble, I sat down or I stood, in front of the commander's desk. And she basically just told me, she said, look, you've got two options here. She's like, I got an LOR in this hand and I've got a Article 15 in this hand. She said, what you tell me next depends on which one you get. And, I basically just, I took full responsibility of the actions that I had taken during that time. And it wasn't, I mean, you just did it. So, I got the referral EPR, I got all that crap. And I tell you, man, it was just, I had checked out when that happened. There was some incidents that, and I can tell you all about them, but there were some things that happened after that. I mean, this is no kidding. So I got in trouble, literally was banned from going to the office for, just so you can tell, I was in Philadelphia recruiting medical professionals at the time. Uh, when they came in, did their investigation, they basically said, you can't come to work for the next until this is resolved. So for 2 weeks, I was driving an hour and a half every morning in my own personal car, an hour and a half to work in Harrisburg. To people I didn't know, obviously you're walking in there, they know you're in trouble. So, they look at you differently and all that stuff. But
Very awkward.
oh, it was very, very awkward. Oh, it was very awkward. And it was, so during that time, I'm going through a divorce. So I had that. I'm living in this big house by myself. And then I broke my leg. Um, I literally should have wrote a country song when I did this. It was just,
Sounds like it.
oh, dude. And it was, and then once everything got, when her and I had that conversation and, what I told her, she was, I got my referral EPR, got my LOR, got all that crap. I knew then, I'm like, I'm done. I'm too far into this to recover. You know what I mean? Like I'm only going to be a master sergeant. I'm never going to get anything higher than that. So I knew at that moment I'm retiring at 20 years. I'm getting out because I knew I couldn't go into recruiting because I would have gotten, I left there at year 16 or something like that. And they, maybe it's year 16 and a half. You have to be in that assignment for 4 years. So I didn't have the 4 years retainability. And at that point where I was at, I couldn't extend or anything like that past the 20. So,
how long were you recruiting for?
8 years. 8 years, yeah. So my first 4 years enlisted. Well, let me finish talking about retiring. So yeah, so I had checked out, and then I got out to Nellis. They called me. This was the pisser of it all. Oh man, there's only two assignments I ever wanted to take, and the only really ones I want. I wanted to go to Ramstein, which I never got to go to, and I wanted to go to Okinawa, and I never got to go there. But when my assignments were coming out, leaving recruiting is kind of like leaving OSON. They kind of, special duty. You probably had that option when you left teaching. I had an assignment to go to Okinawa. I'll never forget it. It was like November I found out. So I scheduled 2 weeks of leave because I was like, I probably am not going to come 2 weeks leave to come home at Christmas. I'm probably not going to be home from Christmas the next 3 or 4 years. Came home for 2 weeks, went back. Within like 2 weeks after that, my assignment was canceled and they called me and they're like, you can go to, what's the base out in California? It's out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, you can go to Edwards, you can go to Nellis. I said, sign me up for Nellis. Wow. I said, I'm not going to Edwards.
For the assignment getting canceled?
No, they didn't have any reasons for it. They just canceled it. So I think it may have had something to do. I was going through a divorce because everything changes if you're single, you're married. The longevity of your assignment could be a little different overseas, and so I think that could have had something to do with it. So yeah, and then it was just like, man, it was. I'll tell you what, it was. I was in a dark place for a very long time during, from the time I got in trouble. I mean, because at that point, I had been a pretty good, airman, NCO, and all that stuff. It was just at that point, I was just like, man, I've literally just thrown away 15 years of my life because of this one incident, and it happens. But so yeah, I mean, I was never in a I'm going to hurt myself area, but I was in an area where, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to do my job. I'm going to come home and I'm going to go drink at a bar. And that's pretty much what I did. I did that for about the next 4.5 years. Yeah, so it was.
So you already had it in your head at 20, I'm retiring.
Oh yeah, I was done.
Okay. So
There was
decision was
no
made. Okay.
there, and it was, you know, it wasn't anything. I caused my own problems. It was my own doing. But I was still, like I was telling you before we started talking. There was a moment after that where I finally got like almost a little piece about, well, I'm not saying I was done wrong, but the people that put helped me get in that position, they kind of got theirs too. So I kind of felt bad. It's kind of a bad way to look at it, but I just kind of laughed when it all happened. I'm like, that happens, you, and it's, yeah, when you're in that situation, and I know you've probably been in that room being a chief, and you're looking at someone who's in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
When you're standing there and you're facing this lieutenant colonel or colonel, I can't remember what she was, and you're over here and you've got a chief and you've got a senior and and you're just like looking at them like, what I did, that everyone's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You got to make an example out of someone, and here I am and then my life was, I had about another 18 months left there. My life was pretty bad for 18 months. I mean,
You
you know
stayed
I,
in recruiting for 18 more months?
oh yeah, I had 18 more months left on that assignment.
They didn't
Yeah.
just move you out?
Mm-mm. Nope.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, and then
Goodness.
this is when the housing market crashed, so my house got foreclosed on because you PCS from there to there, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like your pay drops because I'm in the Northeast, and your BAH is a bunch, and I go out to Las Vegas. My BAH wasn't a lot. I didn't make enough money to pay for both of them, and I
Yeah.
had to go out there and go to my commander and tell him the whole situation, and he was really cool about it, and he just said, "Hey, um, all I can tell you to do is don't go and buy anything extravagant during this whole process." He said,
Yeah.
because
That.
if it shows you, if you went out here and bought yourself a new sports car, but you can't make your house payment in 2,000 miles away, really you can. And I'm like, I get it. And the problem was my ex-wife refused to help pay anything. So I was like, well, and you met her.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's fine. That's but I'm like, all right, this is what it is. And so you take the you take the suffering of the 7 years of a foreclosure on your credit report. And yeah, so it was, to say I was in a bad place. Vegas was probably not the best place I should have gone to.
No, no.
That was, when you've got everything at your fingertips 24 hours a day, it's not a good thing when you're sitting there, you know, battling a lot of anger and some probably a little bit of depression. And, you're like,
I could throw booze on this and see what happens.
oh, this is going to be a great idea. Yeah. So, yeah. So when it came time to retire, I just retired. I mean, Jake, I didn't have a ceremony. I didn't have a retirement party. I did have a retirement party in Tennessee, but I didn't have anything out there because, you
Didn't
know,
care.
I didn't care. No, I just, and it just, when I went out to Nellis, the guys I worked with, they were great, but I never made a bond with them. Some of them, I had a couple of good friends out there, but, never made a really strong bond with them. So when it came time to retire, it was like, yeah, I'm just going to walk out the door and call it quits. And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
It happens, but
So, if you can think back to that time, how do you think the service changed you? How do you think 20 years in the service changed you?
oh man, I tell you, it really makes you grow up. You ain't got much of a choice. You've kind of got to, you've got to shit or get out the pot when you get in there. And you can't. I think another thing too. I think it makes you. And I look back on it, and I very rarely do. I mean, I really, very rarely think about it. But I look back, and I remember when I was in Holloman in New Mexico, I had a supervisor. He was like the assistant flight chief or something like that. Really, really nice man. And he said, you're over here and you're an A1C, and he said, can these people, they follow you, they like you, they listen to what you got to say. He said, you've got to quit channeling that into having a good time and channeling that into something work related. And in my brain, I'm like, but I'm good at having a good time. I'm like, this is kind of my thing anyway. But I remember, I thought about that. It was like, I look back, and you kind of learn how to channel, your leadership abilities. And I think that's important. Not everyone it has that. Not everyone is going. I worked with guys, and I remember I worked with one guy, and he told me, he said, "Man, I don't ever want to be a flight chief. I don't want to be a lab chief." He said, "I just want to work." And I was like, okay. I said, if that's all you want to do, great. I mean,
Yeah.
I had no issue with that at all. But, and then there's guys out here and they want to, they want to do everything they can to, make everyone's life better, make the lab better, make whatever recruiting better, whatever it was you were doing or anything now, your job better. Um, so I think that was one of the things that, you kind of took. I think a lot of the discipline, the ability to fold t-shirts a good way, that was a good thing I learned. Um, the funny thing for me, and I question myself all the time. Of course, I've been out 10 years now, but I like, I hate getting up in the morning. And I'm like, how did I get up in the morning for that many years? And I'm like, and now I'm like, it'll be like 7:30, and I'm like, oh my God, I got to get out of bed. I'm like, how did I do this for so long? But
Especially hungover.
well, that was then. Yeah. Oh yeah. Back then. Yeah, definitely. It was, oh yeah. And you gotta be at work at 6:30.
Mm-hmm,
Uh,
mm-hmm,
that's why we took so many Mondays off during football seasons.
mm-hmm.
Um,
I think back to Korea and how many times you made it to work and you're like, I'm proud of myself.
oh yeah.
Getting out here. Never been
Our,
late.
our lab chief in Korea used to come and sit in between us, and he just had it out for us, and he just wanted to smell alcohol on our breath, and we were always like, "What is wrong with you? Like, we're here, we're not late, don't be an ass, just But I don't know, Jake. It's I don't miss it. I've never once missed it, not one day. I mean, I literally walked out the door on a Thursday. On Monday, I started a new job, and I mean, I never miss it. But I'll tell you what, I did miss. I miss the camaraderie I had with people.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good thing. And, I do miss getting out of bed every day and kind of going into a workplace where you know, like when you did real estate, working from home by yourself it's hard. It's
It
easy to
is.
get distracted. It's easy to get, but I do miss that. I do miss the getting up and going in and, and seeing people and asking how somebody's weekend was. But I mean, I'm living here. I got a really, really good network of friends. Even met, you were at my wedding. You met him, met a bunch
Mm-hmm.
of them, and I've had them for years. So I'm very lucky in that aspect. But um, so that was really like the only thing that I ever was like, I don't miss the commander's calls. I don't miss the, being voluntold to do something. Now if I don't want to do something, I just don't do it.
There's
And
that. Yeah, yeah. That's the beauty of it.
yeah.
The freedom.
Yeah, or you
Um,
have a conversation with, you're out having a conversation with your buddies and they start talking politics and you don't have to like keep your mouth shut. You're like, whether you like or dislike these politicians, it's just like you can vocalize it and nobody can say shit to you about vocalizing it.
nope.
They may not like what you got to say, but that's
You get
okay.
to say it. You
You get
get
to
to say
say
it,
it
sir.
without repercussions.
That is the beauty of freedom. You can say whatever stupid shit you want.
But there is you got the freedom of speech, but you also got the freedom of repercussions.
Oh, for sure.
Or freedom of the freedom of
Consequence.
consequence.
Yep.
Freedom of consequence. Yes, people don't realize that. They think, oh, I can go ahead and say what I want to say. Well, if your company doesn't like that, they can get rid of you for it. You know,
Like
it's
that.
not your First Amendment rights aren't being violated because you're making the company look like crap. So,
Mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. So, what did you think it was going to be like when you left the service? What would you have in mind? Did you have any expectations?
no, I really didn't. And I know that's a short answer, but I mean, I'll tell you what I did. That there was some things, and you'll love this, especially because you know me very well. Is so the job I took when I retired, I worked for this mental health company, great company. I had the great owner, the great boss. I mean, phenomenal people. She paid me very well, but I had no history in that. What they were doing is they looked at my history in recruiting, and I was having to go out into these long term care facilities and work with hospital staff, administrators, CEOs, all this stuff. Uh, but in the company, we ended up firing our HR person. And so, even though I had these responsibilities, the boss, the lady who owned the company, she goes, "Hey, I need you to like brush up on some HR stuff. I want you to be our HR person." And I was like, and let me tell you, I was like, "Are you sure?" She goes, "Yes." And I was like, "Okay." I was
I
like, "All
don't
right."
think that's what you want.
Oh, Jake, I'm telling you, man, it was so I'll never forget it. And you know me, but the one thing I hated doing, I couldn't stand firing people. I could not stand doing it. But it was, that's not, I'm lying when I say that. I couldn't stand firing someone that I knew just wasn't cut out for the job. They're trying hard. They just couldn't do it. Now the people that deserve to be fired, I didn't flinch, man. I mean, literally, they'd walk in my office. I just have a box sitting there being like, you know why you're here. Yeah, I know why I'm here. I'm like, okay. But my I got out of HR. One incident got me out of HR, and it was typical. military, Air Force, whatever shit that I did. Girl comes in, she's got a complaint, and she's sitting there, and I'm listening to her, and in my brain, I'm like, "This is your problem." But my brain literally transformed into my mouth, and that was what came out of my mouth when I said it. I'm like, seriously, this is what's wrong? And she just looks at me like stunned, like, what? And I'm like, this is your problem for the day? And she goes, you're here to help me. I'm like, just get over it. I said, it's not a big deal. She leaves my office. I mean, within 5 minutes, my boss walks in and she goes, you cannot tell people to get over it. But, I'm like, well, because to me, it wasn't a big deal. I'm thinking,
Yeah.
but, it wasn't anything like, it really, looking back on it, it wasn't that severe of an issue. It was just, this person's feelings got hurt at work and then they wanted me to fix the problem. I'm like, I can't fix your feelings. I don't know what to tell you. I don't.
That's what HR does. HR fixes feelings.
I know my wife used to be in HR. I don't know how she did it. I don't know how she did it. So I'm like, but it's, I don't know. So I knew right then, I'm like, yeah, HR is not my thing. I'm not doing this.
I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked that HR is not your thing.
Yeah.
So when you were getting out, you had a job lined up, had everything. So you rolled from active duty into another job almost immediately. You had that lined up. So you didn't really focus on much in that. What did you focus on during that transition? Anything at all?
No, I was ready. I mean, I had everything taken care of, and I was very fortunate in that aspect, and it was, um, the only thing that I really look back on and I regret doing is I should have taken, I had what, 33 days of leave, plus you throw in your 21 days of convalescent leave and blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, I had about 2 months off. I should have taken my 2 months off.
Mm.
But my brain was, you know, I'm going to double dip on money right now. I'm going to get 2 paychecks coming in. I'm going to do this. But looking back on it, I really should have I should have taken the time and just kind of unwind. But I'm afraid if I'd have done that also, I don't know. I don't know what I would have done. You know what I mean? I mean, what am I going to do? So it's like, going to work was good, and it was a good thing, which
Structure.
probably helped with the transition.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I learned all about that, especially vacation days. Oh well, when you start out, you get 2 weeks off a year, and I'm like 2 weeks. I was like, oh, I don't know about all that. I'm like, I need more.
What
I
happened
need
to
more than
30
two
days,
weeks.
guys?
Can
What
I
happened to
can I not
30
get like
days?
30 days at least? Um, but it's just the corporate world for you.
Yeah,
You
it
don't
is.
work that way. It doesn't work that way at all until you've been there for a while.
So in that transition piece, and you can take it from that particular transition to now. What what are some things you learned?
Well, things I learned. I think the big thing for me, I learned really was when I was leaving the Air Force. Even though I had emotionally, kind of checked out. Now, when I said that, I mean I still did what I was supposed to do. I did all my, I checked all my boxes. I made sure I did all that crap. But the learning thing would have been, you kind of figure out how you kind of figure out who you really are without somebody telling you who you really are. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you're in the Air Force, of course you had a very big position, at the end of your career. And even probably before that, you have people always, there's always some type of guidance going on.
Mm-hmm.
When I left, that guidance, it was kind of gone. And I had to kind of figure out, I went from going to the same place at work every single day for 20 years to the company I worked for. I had to set my schedule up to go to, excuse me, 27 different hospitals or long-term care facilities. I had to go, that took me back to kind of the recruiting part where it was like, I'm setting up school visits, I'm setting up hospital visits. Um, so you almost learn how to kind of think for yourself, and that's for a lot of people. And you may have experienced this, or you probably know some people that experience this. A lot of people, when they get out, that transition's so hard because you are no longer Sergeant Tucker or Chief Petersey or
Mm-hmm.
Sergeant whoever, you know, and that's one thing I tried to explain to people when I was, people don't care unless you get into a government job, that's one thing. But, a lot of people, they just don't care,
Mm-hmm.
and I think what you're doing here with the podcast and everything, it's, there's so many people that I've met, that the whatever branch of service they were in was their identity. Learning how to break that identity
Hmm.
is hard. I think it's a mental thing to get past, and it's, you know it. You see the guys out here all the time, and it's just, you know, I have a few military friends around here where I live at, and we get together, we can crack about things because no matter what branch you're in, you know, it don't matter what branch you're in, the bullshit's still the same.
Yes.
Yeah, it's still the
Hmm.
same. It doesn't matter what you did. But and when I say bullshit, I use that in a very loving way. Is you know the everyday going to work and dealing with the crap we deal with at work, and we laugh about it, we make jokes about it while we're there, and um, you're doing all that, but it is what it is. So, but I do meet people, and that's just that's their identity.
Hmm.
That's who they are, and it's like, well, how long were you in for? 4 years, and I'm like, 4 years. I'm like, shit. I can't imagine going back 26 years and getting out and being like, that being, but I understand it. Now, these old school guys, I completely understand that. And when I mean old school guys, I mean, you go back to like, Vietnam area,
Hmm. Hmm.
Korean War era guys. I understand that because their life was way different than what you and I did.
Oh, for
Way,
sure.
way
For
different.
sure.
So I understand that. But like, guys that kind of went in when we did, it's like, you gotta. I just look at it as it's a book that I wrote for 20 years and it's now closed. Except for you, you bring up all these wounds. I'm over here like the tissue. I'm
You're
crying and
welcome.
shit.
You're welcome. I'll scratch off them scabs
You
for
know
you.
me, man. I'm a tearjerker guy.
Yeah.
I only do that with my kids and my family. That's it.
The
Everybody else, I don't get upset with.
the oh, I've seen you very upset.
Yeah,
Not
angry,
crying, but yes, angry.
angry.
You bring up a good point, and that is, for most of our adult life, I consider my career my adult life.
Yeah.
There was a there was a title associated with your name.
Hmm.
For no matter what you were doing, no matter where you were, there was a title associated with it. And we don't really, unless you had a significant life event somewhere in there, you don't really have the chance to go, who am I without that title? Who am I
Hmm.
without this piece of paraphernalia, if you will, until you retire or get out, and then
Well,
you say,
who are you without the uniform?
yeah. Hmm.
That's basically it. Because no matter what, I mean, even you take it off when you go home, it's still there. It's hanging in your
Hmm.
closet.
Hmm.
It's still who you are.
And you can get called to put it back on the same day.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That I mean, in our job, it never really the stuff like that rarely happened.
Hmm.
I think it happened. What there was something happened at Langley, and remember, it was Chad Dodds. Remember Chad?
I
He
do.
had he was he was going on leave, but he was leaving like on Saturday, but we were off on Friday, and then he left on Thursday on a flight with the
Yeah,
California or something like that. And literally within like 9 hours, he had to come back. I think it was Chad.
it was Chad, and I think it
It might not have been California, but it was.
was it 9/11 related, or was it? I don't remember what it was. No, it was after
I was in
9/11.
ALS during 9/11.
I was in Keflavik,
Oh, okay.
um, on that really hard TDY we had to do to Iceland. That was a tough one, man.
Oh, I know I talk about Iceland a lot. Well, and the reason I talk about it is I don't talk about like the stories, and I talk about like people talk about, hey, where's somewhere you've been that you'd like to go back to? I said I would love to go back to Iceland.
Hmm.
I'd love to go back. The 4 years there, and it's you work hard for like 4 days, and then you're off for like a week until they call you to come do something, and then that 7 days, it's like okay, let's go find a place to go have beers and have a good time and do what we want to do. But
Yep, yep. Um, so it sounds like during your transition, or when you were leaving the Air Force, and maybe up until now, you were focused on kind of the next step, moving forward. What's next? Where are you going next? What's the next career look like? Is that accurate?
yes, very much so. I've always kind of, I think mentally, I try not to, I don't ever try to take steps back. I mean, we do, you do take steps back in life. It's just the way it is. But I've looked about that at everything. It didn't matter if it was the house I bought or it was the car I was driving or the job I was doing. We're going to upgrade next. We're going to go to a nicer thing next. Now, sometimes it might take, especially when you get into like a big item like a house or something, it might take a while to do that.
Hmm.
But I've always tried to been like, hey, let's, what's the next adventure going to be? And it's, so I think for me, it's kind of been that way. I mean, I love doing what I do now. I mean, I've talked about getting out of it a little bit, but I think it gives me and my family the flexibility. You know, if I want to go take a vacation, I go take a vacation. I don't have
Mm-hmm.
to ask anybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a work wife, and she relies on me when she's on vacation, and I rely on her when I'm on vacation. Uh, so it's great. You know, it's great. But yeah, I think from a standpoint of, I think you need to be progressing.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm ready to get to the point now where I'm like, even though I'm 53, I'm technically 10 years from retirement. You know, we're kind of at the process now. We're like 56 might be the end, and we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna, I won't get rid of my real estate license, but it'll just be, one of those deals where you're not out here trying to find business every single day.
Mm-hmm. But
Um,
if something comes up, you'll take care of it.
yeah, of course,
Mm-hmm.
of course, of course. But
If you if
go
you had
ahead.
to put if you had to put a I don't know if you had to put a looking at everything from 10 years ago to now to leaving, what would you say was the biggest challenge for you in that time?
Oh, the biggest challenge for me was moving from Las Vegas to Maryville, Tennessee. That was
That's a little
hard.
that's a little bit different, huh?
I mean, you've been here. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard. It was hard. I mean, it was, I went from big city, bright lights, anything I wanted 24 hours a day to very small town. I remember moved back, stayed with mom and dad, which hell, I could still be staying there if I wanted to. They wouldn't have cared. Um, but it was a Wednesday. I remember it was a Wednesday, and I was sitting there and I was hungry. It was like 10 o'clock at night. Of course, my time changes still. I'm off a little bit. This was very, very soon after I moved back.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, hey, I think I'm going to run into town and get something to eat. My dad goes, well, where are you going to go eat at? I'm like, I don't know. Just go somewhere to eat. And he goes, there's nothing open. And in my head, I'm like, oh, shit. I'm like, Taco Bell's open? He goes, you probably go to Taco Bell. They might be open. I was like,
Maybe.
oh, and it was, it's funny, and I love where I live at. I mean, I really, it's, I mean, I left a town of 3 million people where I was going out to functions and events and shows, and you're dressing up, wearing suits and all this. Well, you don't have to do that here. It's, you dress nice, but you don't have to really do all that. But I'll never forget. Uh, it was like maybe December of 2017, and a buddy of mine called me. He's like, "Hey, you want to go out tonight?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's go out." And we go out, and he picks me up. I had on a pair of gym pants and a sweatshirt on a Saturday night, and I was going out. Nobody thought twice about it. Random people I knew, they didn't think anything about it. And I was just like, this is my life now. I'm like, I said, I've literally resorted to sweatpants and sweatshirts for social life. That's just me. But no, I mean, that was a one time deal. But it was like, because I really just thought we were going to go like to like this little bar or whatever. We didn't. We went to this bigger place and uh, rented all these people that I knew. And I'm like, this is how y'all have seen me for the first time in 23 years. And I'm like, and I'm in a pair of gym pants and a sweatshirt. I'm like, they're probably like, great. I think I had a hat on too, which I'm like. So yeah, but it's but that was a hard transition. I mean, you grew up an army brat, and the one thing that, coming from a town where, I was here my entire life, and you come back here, so much where I live has changed. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
so much. I mean, it was, I know people would ask me, they'd call and, and they were like, hey, let's do this. I'm like, all right, cool. Where's that at? He'd be like, oh, well, it's over here. And I'm like, okay, where's that at? They're like, I'm like, what used to be there? They're like, oh, this used to be this. I'm like, I know where I'm at. I'll meet you there. I'm like, I'm good. But, things, I mean, our population in this little town I live in, we have pretty much tripled, quadrupled in the last 30 years. And it's a very popular place for people to move.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're hearing this, just call me, reach out to me. I would love to find you a house if you move here. That would be phenomenal. You can find me on social media, whatever you want to do. I'll give you my phone number through this. I don't care. But no, I mean, that's, we have an influx of Californians, New Yorkers, moving here.
Awesome.
They're, yeah, our only mentality is, don't,
Don't
don't California our Tennessee.
no no no. I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
It's,
Atlanta area is blowing up the same way, and it's the same general concept. Don't
yeah.
bring California here. We don't need it.
Yeah. Nashville. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I love California. I've had a lot of fun in that place, really pretty, a lot of places to go see, but it's just like, It's different. It's different than what we live in here, but and where you live at.
Yeah,
Definitely where you live at.
yeah.
What was
So
your
it's
hardest transition? You
oh
always ask the questions. What was tough for you to get out?
oh
What'd you
for
do?
now
28 years? Did you do 28 years? 27 years?
25, 25.
25.
Probably leaving or coming here. So I left when I left Vegas, or not Vegas. When I left New Jersey, I'd only been there for a year. Retired during COVID. Got here during COVID. Knew nobody.
Mm-hmm.
So knew nobody. Still haven't built a significant. Still haven't built a significant um, community here.
Mm-hmm.
Just been worried about working and doing stuff. So probably this one was the hardest transition.
Yeah.
All the other ones, when you go somewhere, inevitably when you were in the service, you'd find somebody either at the place that you worked, at the gym, somebody that you ran into that you would find a commonality with in no time flat, and then you'd have somebody to hang out with.
Oh yeah.
So it's just not the same thing. I
Yeah.
haven't worked anywhere close to my house, so it's not like I'm gonna hang out from anybody from work because everywhere I've worked so far has been an hour away from the house.
Do you know what I did in Pennsylvania? Because it's kind of like, the one good thing about recruiting was, even though, if I could go back, and change some things, I would definitely have changed the route that I took in recruiting. But one of the things that I did, and it was, so I moved into this neighborhood and didn't know anyone. I had 6 people I worked with. That was it. And none of us lived near each other. So one day I got there in like June, and I went outside. I got out a chair. I sat at my driveway, and I brought a cooler full of beer, and I just sat there and started drinking beer, listening to music. All of a sudden, my neighbor next door, he comes out, and he was like, "Oh, you're the new guy." I was like, "I am." He was like, "You're sitting in the driveway drinking beer." I said, "That's the only way I figure out how you guys are going to come out and be like, hey, who is this guy?" He was like, "What?" I said, "Because I don't know, man." I said, "I don't know how to make friends here." I'm like, "I'm just trying." And he just started laughing. And then this guy, John, across the street came over, and then another guy came across, and we became friends.
There
That's
you
kind of
go.
how I did it. It's not the most ideal, but I tried it in Las Vegas too. And people out there are they're so not friendly. Not one person walked out of their house. I did the exact
Really,
same thing. Yeah. And no one, 5, 6 years I lived there. I didn't know any of my neighbors.
really.
6 years. Yeah. It was kind of weird.
Wow.
Yeah, it was kind
Was it
of,
because of the heat?
I just think that it's such a transient, community. There's a lot of people from Southern California move there because, Nevada's so much cheaper than California is. And we have a lot of, we had a lot of Michiganders, Michigan, what are they? Michiganders? Whatever. A lot of people from Michigan move in there. A lot of people from other states.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they just get in there and they just have their own little world. And, they have their own family, and the heat's probably part of it too, though. I mean, when I moved out there, it was in June, that's kind of PCS window there.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was hot. I was just there in May, and it was about 98 degrees the last week of May when I was there. So, and I think the other day I saw it was like 118 there.
That's
Yeah,
pretty damn hot.
it was hot. Yeah. We went out and saw, Kenny Chesney at the Sphere.
Oh, how was it?
Great. I highly recommend. I don't care who you like. Just find you a show that's there and go see it. I've never seen anything like it. It
Really?
was
Is it that good?
it was amazing. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It's kind of, yeah, they have, I can't remember how many speakers they have in that place, but it's over 100,000 speakers in that place.
Really?
Each seat has its own specific speaker aimed toward them.
Oh, so there's no bad seats, is what you're saying?
No, I sat in the 300 section, and people, I had a friend of mine went out there, and he saw the Grateful Dead,
Mm.
him and his girlfriend, and we were talking about, because my wife and I like Kenny Chesney, so we were going, and he's a local guy too. He's from Knoxville, and he said, "Don't sit low, sit high." He's like, "You want to sit high because basically it's you're almost like you're in a gigantic fish bowl, and you're completely surrounded by everything audiovisual, 360 degrees. I think there's a little spot in the back where it's like maybe a 20 by 20 foot area where it's just, I don't know what it is, to be honest with you. So like the entire show, you go to a concert and you're watching the band,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on. You don't pay attention to the band. You pay attention to the video screen that's going on around you.
Oh,
It's
really?
just, it was phenomenal. I mean, Robin got to the point where there was one section where he was, I don't know what song it was, but you were a pinball in a pinball machine. And as you're going through the pinball machine, like the little bridges you'd go under, it was pictures of him and all and other people and all this stuff. And but I mean, you're going up, down, looping around, you know. And I look over at her, and her eyes are closed. She was getting nauseous because she gets seasick anyway. So she and I was like, "Are you asleep?" And she goes, "No, I got to close my eyes." She's like, "It's making me nauseous." I was like, "Oh," to me, it was just really cool. It was, but I highly recommend it.
Awesome.
Definitely recommend it. So let me ask you a question. If you could go back and change one thing, not personal wise, but like professional wise in your Air Force career, you know, what would you go back and change?
True. Um,
Or maybe redo. You'd go back and redo it. You don't have to I guess you I don't have, I guess you have to change it, but you can redo it.
hmm, I don't know. I made a lot of decisions. The most difficult thing was after I made chief, getting out of Ramstein. So I was there, made chief. Um, wife and kids left, and I spent 9, 10 months, almost a year, trying to
Hmm.
figure out how to get out of Ramstein. Um, what assignment I can take? How can I get close? What can I do? And I ended up in Jersey, which would met a lot of good people, but went back to a flight again. And if I was on the verge of retiring, which I was anyway, being back in that environment pushed me over the edge. It's not. I didn't want to do that again. It was very, it's once you've done that in our career field, it's a blueprint. You know exactly what you're going to do. You know exactly how it has to happen. All you're doing is putting people in the right places and letting them go. And so that's probably the only thing. I don't think I would change anything else. Um, I got to pick a lot of. I took a lot of control. The only time I didn't have control of an assignment really was when I picked up Ramstein the first time. I knew I was getting an assignment. Actually, I did because I had an assignment to Holloman, and
Oh my lord.
my group commander got to cancel for me, and then I picked up Ramstein. Um, and then when I left Ramstein, I was going to go to Vegas. Then I tried to pick up with the audit team, and then I ended up in South Carolina. So it was a little bit clunky, but
Hmm.
other than that, mm-mm. Trying to figure out a better way out of Ramstein as a chief would have been. I might have stayed longer, might have tried to figure it out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but that
What?
was the.
Well, that's good. I mean, third almost 25 years and that's your, you know, and really yours was just based on family,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you
that's
know.
it. Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good. I mean, I think most people would probably have a, you know, a handful of things they could go back and redo. At least I think for me it would been if I could go back and redo like so when I was an enlisted recruiter and I had a very successful I mean I was my other than my last 18 months of recruiting, everything was great. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I was very good at what I was doing. Anyway, but when you leave enlisted recruiting, you have multiple options. You have like MEPS, you have like, depending on your rank, you could be a flight chief. You can go be an instructor. You can go do health professions recruiting, all that stuff. So I had this guy that we worked for, and I'll tell you the type of guy he was. So he was a chief, but I actually met someone who worked in his career field, and he really rubbed people the wrong way a lot. And I mean, I'll tell you the type of guy. We'd be doing PT at like an event, and he'd coin check everyone at PT. And you're like, dude, you know these PT shorts, like they're yeah. Anyways, I mean,
Dead sexy is what they are. Dead
yeah. Oh,
sexy.
I had mine on yesterday all day long.
Did you?
They're comfortable, man. I love wearing mine. I sleep in them sometimes. Yeah, they're comfortable. Anyway, that's about the only thing I have that says Air Force other than a hat. Uh, and it's and I go back. It's not that I'm not proud of it. It's just another chapter in my life.
Mm-hmm.
That book was written and it's gone, and I am doing something else. And you know, I think there for a while I did have a license plate when I got into real estate, thinking that maybe people would see it, and then it just never nothing really happened from it. But anyway, um, so he called when assignments were starting to come down. I remember there was a lot of health professions. Health professions was just changing their ways of doing things. Instead of having like a squadron, you worked directly for a group, and we had I don't they called them hubs. So you had like New York covered from New York City up to Maine. Philly, we covered uh, all of New Jersey down into parts of Maryland, half of Philadelphia or half of Pennsylvania. And anyway, then it goes into disease. If you hear something growling, my dogs or somebody must be outside. So it was kind of an unknown, and I kind of wanted to, we call it the bag. I wanted to get off the bag, which is basically what, you're on the bag when you're a recruiter. And I either wanted to go do something, and there was a position in Knoxville for MEPS, and I put in for it, and it made sense. I had, I was the closest one. I had been there almost a little over 4 years, so it was almost a guarantee. Well, he calls me up and he said, "Hey, if you want to make chief, you don't need to go to MEPS." You hear the dogs?
I do.
He said, "Shut up. If you want to make chief, you have got to shut up." Oh, I don't know who that is. Anyway, you've got to go into health professions recruiting. Come here, Charlie. And I said, "I don't want to make chief. You want to talk about kicking someone square in the nuts. You would have thought I had killed his kids." He goes, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah, I don't want to." I said, I shouldn't say I didn't want to. I said, "I don't have that desire to do that." And he said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to go to MEPS because my son lives in Maryville." And I said, "And I want to be in Knoxville so I can be close to him." He goes, "Well, maybe the next assignment you can be close to him." And I was like, "Well, I don't understand." And now, mind you, this guy had never had any recruiting experience at all. We just, there's not a lot of chiefs in recruiting. There are some, but there's not many. So anyway, he said, "Well, you need to, probably go into health profession." I said, "I don't want to do it." And I said, "It's my assignment." I said, "Just let me do what I want to do." And he wouldn't have anything to do with it. Well, then like 2 days later, I get a phone call from Texas where the recruiting headquarters is at. And by that time I had called our group superintendent, who was a chief, who was recruiting, and I was like, he is dictating where people are going. I wasn't the only one. And he was like, "Well, he said you want." I said, "No." I said, "I do not want to do this." I said, "I either want to do this or this." And so anyway, a few days go by and got a phone call from Texas, and they offered me to come down there and be an instructor. And which recruiting instructors is, it's just, it's not that it's hard work, but it's enjoyable to watch those guys do what they do. Anyway, and I turned it down because I didn't want to go to Texas, and I ended up in Philadelphia. And I remember him the chief called me. He's like, "Hey, congratulations!" In the town it was called, it wasn't Philly's, it was Philly's the hub. It was Bala Sinwid, Pennsylvania, which is on the outskirts of Philadelphia. And I hung up the phone on him. That's my biggest regret. I should have taken the assignment to go to Texas. I should have gone to San Antonio, because a lot happened in Pennsylvania that wouldn't have happened in Texas. Well, I should say it wouldn't have. Probably wouldn't have happened in Texas, but it was like that was a complete life-changing trajectory for me going to Pennsylvania. And I want to think in my head, but don't get me wrong, everything works out in the end. It's just, but looking back on the mental crap that I went through, part of that would have still happened in Texas, but the majority of it would not have happened in Texas. So I do regret that. That's about it. I mean, I probably should have rebounded a little bit better when I went through all that crap and been like, "All right, get your head out of your ass and let's, get back to work and let's do what you're going to do." And, and it was just like, and I just didn't mentally, I was not there. And it's, you're going through that. And it's kind of funny. I've been divorced, you've been divorced. People don't realize when you go through something, a divorce or something, that there's a lot of pain and stress involved. You want to go through it, but the pain and so, I mean, I've got friends here, man, and they'll like laugh about it, and I'm like, and I've snapped on them once, and I'm like, "Dude, do you even realize what I went through? Do you have any idea what I was going through at that moment?" And I said, "And that was just a small part of it." And I'm like, "And you find it comical that I did all this?" And I, you just want to be like, "F you, man." I'm like, as my friend, you should have picked up the phone and called me, but you didn't do it. But, you look back on it, you're like, whatever. I made it. That's 13 years ago, 14 years ago. So it's, but that's my only regret. That was it.
If you were to give advice to your pre-retirement Jeff Tucker, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give?
Oh, man. I think probably the biggest thing would be, I would say, don't, go with your gut. Don't blow some things off, take some things a little bit more seriously. I've always just been that person where I'm like, it'll work out. it'll work out. Sometimes it doesn't work out. And, I learned that as I've gotten older, but I think you got to, I think you've got to sometimes look at situations a little more seriously and you know, even maybe been like, you might have, maybe you should have stayed in 2 or 3 more years.
Mm.
That might, you could have got a different assignment and gone some. I loved Nevada. I loved Las Vegas, but it wasn't a good place, for me to be at. I mean, it's fun, but it's a fun time for a short period of time.
Right.
So I think, yeah, the biggest thing would be most likely, hey, get yourself refocused and get back to doing what you're good at doing, and take some things a little bit more seriously than you did at the time. Um, you know, you know me. I mean, I've just always been who I am. I'm not going to change. Whether I'm 53 or I'm 83, I'm just going to be who I am. And but there, I did learn that. I was just like, okay, dummy, But Jake, you think about it. Think about your life and think about small decisions you've made.
Oh yeah.
I think about this not a lot, but I mean, it's crossed my mind, and some friends of mine, my friend Kenny, we've had this conversation, and it's like, what if one night you were going here and you decided, oh, I'm not going to go here, I'm going to go here. Well, this right here, you went was a phone call you made. If that person doesn't pick up that phone, it completely changes the trajectory of where your life goes.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have those moments.
Probably more often than we think about.
Oh yeah, and I think about it, not a lot, but I mean, I have thought about it. I'm just like, what if I had retired in 2015 and immediately moved back here? My life probably wouldn't be the same as it is right now. Even though I should have, I didn't. But my life wouldn't be the same thing. Or what if I had, what if I had gone to Texas instead of going to Pennsylvania? Or, what if I hadn't gotten in trouble in Pennsylvania because I made a stupid decision? Um, Little bitty things. It kind of makes you think, and I'm just like, okay, well,
There's the flip side of that is that had you not gone through those experiences, you wouldn't be who you are now. That all those experiences change you one way or another, whether it was having the fortitude to own up to a decision that you made, or
yeah,
deal with the repercussions, or whatever it is. Um, it's a, I won't say it's a fun game, but if you look at those decision points and go, man, if I would have done that, this, or this might have happened. Maybe.
oh yeah,
What did I learn from that, and how did I grow from that, and am I better off now for having experienced that?
yeah, yeah, because we learn from all of our experiences, whether they're good or bad, indifferent, whatever they are. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're 100% correct. I mean, that's kind of what gets me out of my head thinking about, man, what if I hadn't done that, or what if I'd done this instead? And it's like, well, stupid, if you had done that, then this wouldn't have worked out for you, and this, this wouldn't have happened. So,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
it all worked out in the end so far.
Well, Jeff, I really, really appreciate the time, my friend. It's
Oh,
been
brother, me too.
fantastic talking to you. And again, thank you very, very much. And we will talk again soon.
Sounds good, buddy. Good talking with you.
Bye.
See you.